let's contrast, because you've been on both ends of the spectrum. And, some people say, well, he's an extreme guy. He goes from one to the other, but there's a transition. But compare like a day of vegan eating back, whatever, 2 years in when you were feeling pretty good versus a day of, carnivore eating now. What's the difference look like to you?
Sure. Do you want me to explain what exactly I was eating on a day of veganism versus carnivore? Is that what you need?
Sure. That'd be great.
Yeah. So we would start off on the vegan days with a fruit blended smoothie, which usually encompassed having sliced fruit on top and then a big old bowl of sugar-laden. Now I know sugar-laden granola, a lot of coffee because I had no energy. And then it would be snacks during the morning, a lot of sort of dried chips. My wife would have dehydrator and be drying a lot of vegetables and things like that. Lunch would be sort of roasted beets, sweet potato based, something potato based, because that would fill you up sort of. Dinner, a lot of the same, maybe some roasted vegetables, more potato based stuff. And then in attempting to make vegetables look into meat dishes, which I find highly ironic now, as you see with plant-based eaters, they try and make things look like meat to trick their brain, I guess, versus now, oh man, I wake up in the morning, I am up and at 'em. I don't really need the coffee anymore, although I have to put my hand on my heart. I still drink it, albeit a little bit later in the morning. I have a couple of 80-20 patties, some bacon. I'm good. Sometimes I'll have some more patties for lunch after I exercise if I need to. Dinner will be a big old ribeye and or even sometimes a couple of pieces of steak and some chicken wings. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And it's just been incredible in certain terms of how that's changed my life profoundly.
When you're back, because I heard a little bit about potatoes on the vegan diet, but I didn't see, was there a focus on protein in that? I mean, because I didn't see they talk about lentils and peas and soybeans and things like that to try to get an adequate amount of protein. How were you trying to deal with protein back then?
Thanks for triggering my memory, Dr. Baker. Absolutely. There was a ton of that. And even when I saw my GP at the time I was vegan, the GP was telling me, you're doing the right thing. I've heard a lot about this vegan diet, but just make sure you're getting adequate protein, things like lentils and beans. And I ate a ton of that stuff. I should have mentioned that in part of my diet, but I wasn't thinking. We ate a ton of beans. And, we're trying to do the right thing. We were slow cooking them to get hopefully all the toxins out. But even still, they were just so terrible on my digestion, my poor digestion, my gut. It's still recovering.
Yeah, I can imagine, it caused a lot of bloating and gas and all that type of stuff. Because some people say, that's just the beginning during the transition phase, but did that persist? I mean, did you continue to have bloating gas issues like that with your guts all throughout the 5 years or 6 years?
Yeah, both of us were not a lot of fun to be around. We were both a lot of bloating, a lot of gas. That's typical with the vegan diet. Of course, everyone makes fun of it when you are a vegan. I will say that, as I transitioned, that, it took a little time to go away, the digestive issues, but it is unbelievably night and day now compared to where I was.
And this is how much of this time in your vegan time were you on the island of Bermuda? Were you in Bermuda at the time?
Yes, sir. The whole time.
And and you think about it's kind of a I don't know if it's considered a tropical island, but it's island. A lot of people will say there's I don't know if there's fresh fruits and what grows native to Bermuda, but is there a large vegan presence in Bermuda?
There really wasn't at the time, hence my wife getting her certification and actually starting her own little plant-based meal planning business. Sadly, to me, since I've been carnivore, there has been a proliferation of now plant-based and vegan infiltrating all over the island now, and much more than when I first started. Yeah, we're a subtropical island. And for folks that don't know, our closest point of land is Cape Hatteras. So we're out in the Atlantic Ocean here. But yeah, there's a lot more veganism here than when I first began.
And then how about the converse as far as doing carnivory? I don't know if I know of anybody else in Bermuda that's doing a carnivore diet right now. You may be the only one on the island. Who knows?
Funnily enough, now there's only a couple of steakhouses here, just a few, and they know if I go out to eat, those are usually the two spots that we go to if we're out on a celebration. But for the most part, we cook at home, but because everything's so expensive, so it's much cheaper to cook at home. I ran into one or two other carnivores because they noticed my plate with the big old tomahawk on it and nothing else. And but I'm hoping that the word gets out here. I really do, because as I mentioned to you, that the vegan, there's a lot of vegan stuff here right now.
Yeah, and as far as your diet today, 2 meals a day, what do you typically? How much do you eat? What do you eat? What does a diet look like today in 2023?
Well, what I noticed, Dr. Baker, as many folks do when they start this way of eating, is that I wasn't eating enough, and because I'm coming from this malnourished vegan background, I was doing a sort of two-mad type approach, 2 meals a day, and I wasn't putting on the weight that I wanted to, especially with building muscle. So I'm kind of eating 2.5-ish now, because I eat my breakfast and then I exercise pretty heavily with weights and sometimes go on a weighted walk. Thanks to you, inspired by your weighted jacket that you wear. I go for a long walk here in the morning sometimes, but I wasn't putting on weight. I was burning at a very fast rate. So now I'm starting to put on weight, that I added that sort of little midday meal after I exercise, a couple more patties and maybe some bacon. And that's working effectively for me. Now, that's not for everyone, as we know, but for someone like me that's trying to get back to a healthy weight, that's something that I'm doing.
Yeah, it's one of the, it's kind of interesting because a lot of people say, well, the only reason people get healthy on a carnivore diet is because they lose weight. And I see a lot of people that actually put on weight and put on muscle, and it's kind of the difference. And maybe you've traded some body fat. I mean, were you basically skin and bones and a little bit kind of a skinny fat guy when you were at the vegan, peak of your veganism?
Yeah. I mean, at the end there, my skin was hanging off me, but I still had the protruding belly from all the bloating. I have a couple of photos if folks ever want to see a picture comparative then versus now on my Instagram page, but it was not a good look. Without being disrespectful to anyone, I used to go out at the end stages there, and people would ask me if I had cancer or something similar along those lines because I looked so terrible, and I felt awful. But no disrespect to anyone going through that, but that's what that was compared to.
You mentioned your wife is now transitioned away from veganism. Was she having any significant issues? I mean, clearly not as bad as you were, I would assume.
No, because again, we did it pounded so hard on the toxic foods, especially on the oxalate side, because beets grow so well here. We ate a ton of beet tops and beets every day. We were roasting them like crazy, and almonds and almond milk. She's having some sort of oxalate dumping issues where we went too quickly, but also with her, and I see if someone asked a question in the chat about my fat adaptation transition, it was very difficult for me, and she's noticing sort of a similar thing. You sort of have to really dial back on the fat, especially for me in the beginning. It took me a good couple of months, where I know some folks can do it pretty easily going from keto to carnivore, and it can be a couple of weeks. For myself, it was a good 5 months, almost 6 months before I really became fat adapted and everything sort of leveled out. Same with her.